The morning sun cast long shadows across the cobblestone courtyard of Kensington Palace as Captain Marcus Steele adjusted his earpiece and checked his watch for the third time in 5 minutes. 27 years of service in the Royal Protection Unit had taught him that routine was everything, but intuition was what kept royals alive. Today, something felt different. "All units, this is Control. Royal Convoy departure in 15 minutes, crackled the voice through his earpiece. Marcus acknowledged with a brief "copy that," while his eyes swept across the gathering vehicles. 3 black Range Rovers sat in perfect formation, their armor-plated bodies gleaming under the early morning light. Behind them, 2 motorcycle outriders revved their engines in synchronized preparation. The convoy was transporting Prince Edward and his wife, Sophie, to the annual Children's Charity Foundation Gala in central London. It should have been a routine journey, one they had made dozens of times before. The route had been planned weeks in advance, security swept twice, and backup plans rehearsed until every officer could execute them blindfolded. Marcus walked the perimeter one final time, his trained eye noting every detail. The palace grounds were secure, the staff had been cleared through multiple security checks, and the weather was perfect for the 40-minute drive into the city. Yet something nagged at him, an uncomfortable feeling that settled in his stomach like a stone. "Captain Steele," called Sergeant Jennifer Hayes as she approached with her German shepherd, Rex. The black and tan dog moved with the fluid precision that marked him as one of the Metropolitan Police's most decorated detection canines. His nose twitched constantly, processing thousands of scents that humans couldn't even imagine. "Final sweep completed, sir. All clear." Marcus nodded but kept watching Rex. The dog seemed more alert than usual, his ears pricked forward and his body slightly tense. After 8 years working together, Hayes knew every subtle shift in her partner's behavior. Rex wasn't indicating danger, but he wasn't completely relaxed either. "Everything all right with Rex?" Marcus asked, knowing that Hayes would give him an honest assessment. "He's been a bit restless this morning," she admitted, running her hand along the dog's neck. "Nothing specific, but you know how he gets when something's not quite right in his world." Marcus did know. Rex had an impressive record of detecting explosives, drugs, and even tracking suspects through the most challenging terrain. More importantly, the dog had an uncanny ability to sense when something was out of place, even if he couldn't identify exactly what it was. The captain's radio buzzed again. "All teams, royal party departing residence in 5 minutes. Final positions, please." Around the courtyard, 23 highly trained protection officers moved into their assigned positions. Some would travel in the convoy vehicles, others would monitor from strategic points along the route, and a few would remain at the palace to secure the location for the royal couple's return that evening. Marcus watched as Prince Edward and Sophie emerged from the palace's main entrance. The prince wore a navy blue suit with a subtle pinstripe, while Sophie was elegant in a cream-colored coat dress. They moved with the practiced ease of people accustomed to public life, acknowledging the security team with friendly nods as they approached their vehicle. "Good morning, Captain," Prince Edward said as Marcus opened the rear door of the middle Range Rover. "Lovely day for a drive." "Indeed, Your Royal Highness," Marcus replied, conducting a final visual sweep of the area. "We'll have you at the venue in 40 minutes. As the royal couple settled into their seats, Marcus took his position in the front passenger seat. The driver, Inspector David Morrison, was a veteran with 15 years of experience driving royal convoys. His hands moved efficiently across the controls, checking communications, GPS tracking, and emergency systems. "Control, this is Convoy 1. Royal party secured and ready for departure," Morrison spoke into his radio. "Convoy 1, you are clear to proceed. Route Bravo confirmed clear, all checkpoints manned." The convoy began to move, rolling smoothly through the palace gates and onto the public roads. The lead vehicle, containing 4 armed protection officers, maintained a precise distance ahead. The royal vehicle followed, with Marcus constantly scanning the surroundings while Morrison navigated through London's morning traffic. The third vehicle, carrying additional security personnel and emergency medical equipment, brought up the rear. For the first 20 minutes, everything proceeded according to plan. They passed through Kensington High Street, navigated the roundabout at Hyde Park Corner, and were making good time toward their destination in Mayfair. Marcus allowed himself to relax slightly, thinking that perhaps his earlier unease had been misplaced. It was then that his radio crackled, with an unexpected transmission. All units, this is Control. We have received an unconfirmed report of suspicious activity near your route. Stand by for possible route alteration. Marcus immediately straightened in his seat. Control, this is Convoy Leader. Please clarify the nature of suspicious activity. Convoy Leader, we're investigating reports of unusual behavior by maintenance workers near Piccadilly Circus. May be nothing, but we're checking it out. The captain's mind raced through the possibilities. Construction and maintenance were common in central London, but the security team always received advance notice of any work that might affect royal routes. Unplanned activity near their path was exactly the kind of anomaly that could indicate a security threat. Morrison, reduce speed and increase following distance, Marcus instructed. He then activated the internal communication system to address the royal passengers. Your Royal Highnesses, we may need to make a slight route adjustment for security reasons. Nothing to be concerned about, but we always err on the side of caution. Prince Edward leaned forward slightly. Of course, Captain, whatever you think is best. As they approached the area near Piccadilly Circus, Marcus could see the problem. A utility truck was parked along the roadside, its crew apparently working on underground cables. What bothered him was that the truck hadn't been there during the morning's route reconnaissance, and no roadwork had been scheduled for this location. Control, this is Convoy Leader. I can see the maintenance crew. Recommend immediate verification of their work authorization. Copy that, Convoy Leader. We're checking with utilities now. The convoy slowed to nearly a crawl as they passed the work site. Marcus studied the three workers carefully. They wore proper safety gear and appeared to be engaged in legitimate underground utility work, but something about their positioning bothered him. Instead of working directly over the utility access point, they seemed to be focusing their attention on the area where the convoy would pass. Control, what's the status on work authorization verification? Convoy Leader, utilities report no scheduled work for this location today. Repeat, no authorized work scheduled. Marcus felt his adrenaline surge. All units, possible code yellow situation, convoy taking immediate alternate route. He was about to instruct Morrison to change direction when his radio exploded with urgent transmissions. Control to all units. We have a code red situation at the original destination. Multiple suspicious packages found at the venue. Bomb disposal en route. Convoy abort. Repeat, convoy abort. The blood drained from Marcus's face. A code red meant an active bomb threat. If they had continued on their original schedule, the royal convoy would be arriving at a potentially deadly situation right about now. Morrison, emergency route to secure location Charlie, Marcus commanded, referring to a predetermined safe house that all protection teams knew by heart. All units, we are implementing emergency protocol 7. As Morrison skillfully navigated the convoy away from both the suspicious workers and their original destination, Marcus's mind was already working through the implications. Two separate suspicious incidents on the same day, at the same time, involving the same royal convoy was far beyond the realm of coincidence. His radio crackled again with updates from the scene at the charity venue. Control to all units, bomb disposal has confirmed multiple devices. Building evacuation in progress. Estimated timeline suggests detonation was planned for the scheduled arrival time of the royal convoy. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. Someone had planned to attack the royal family, and they had come frighteningly close to success. The fact that the bombs were timed for the convoy's arrival meant the attackers had detailed knowledge of the royal schedule and route. As they sped toward the safe house, Marcus began to piece together what might have happened. The suspicious workers they had just passed could have been spotters, positioned to confirm the convoy's approach and signal the final countdown for the bombs at the venue. Or they might have been part of a backup plan, ready to attack the convoy if the primary assault failed. Your Royal Highnesses, Marcus said through the intercom, I need to inform you that we've discovered a serious security threat at your original destination. You are completely safe, but we're taking you to a secure location while we investigate. Good Lord, Prince Edward replied. Is everyone at the venue safe? The building was evacuated successfully, sir. No one was harmed. As they arrived at the safe house, a nondescript office building that served as one of several emergency refuges throughout London, Marcus was already coordinating with counterterrorism units and intelligence services. The investigation would need to move quickly to determine how the attackers had obtained such detailed information about the royal schedule. But even as he organized the security response, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that they had been incredibly fortunate. If not for the suspicious workers near Piccadilly Circus causing them to slow down, and the subsequent discovery of the bombs at the venue, the royal convoy might have arrived precisely on schedule to face a devastating attack. The safe house was a 12-story building that appeared to be ordinary commercial offices from the outside. In reality, the top 3 floors had been converted into a sophisticated refuge complete with independent communication systems, medical facilities, and enough supplies to sustain a small group for several days if necessary. As Prince Edward and Sophie were escorted to the secure floors, Marcus remained in the building's command center, coordinating with the ongoing investigation. Reports were coming in from multiple sources, and the picture they painted was deeply troubling. The bombs at the charity venue had been professionally constructed and strategically placed to cause maximum damage to the building's main entrance and reception area. The timing devices were sophisticated, suggesting the involvement of someone with advanced technical knowledge. Most disturbing of all, the devices had been planted sometime during the night, which meant the attackers had somehow bypassed the venue's security systems. "Captain Steele," called Detective Chief Inspector Sarah Williams as she entered the command center. Williams headed the Metropolitan Police's counter-terrorism unit and had worked with the Royal Protection Unit on several previous occasions. "We need to debrief you on everything you observed during the convoy route." Marcus spent the next 2 hours providing detailed accounts of every aspect of the morning's events. The suspicious workers, the timing of the various incidents, and most importantly, the unusual behavior he had noticed from Rex, the detection dog, back at the palace. "Tell me more about the dog's behavior," Williams requested. "You mentioned he seemed restless." "Rex has been working royal protection for 8 years, Marcus explained. "He's incredibly reliable, but this morning he seemed alert in a way that suggested he was detecting something unusual. Nothing specific enough to indicate, but definitely not his normal relaxed state." Williams made notes in her file. "We'll want to interview Sergeant Hayes in detail about that. Dogs often pick up on things we miss, and his behavior might be relevant to understanding how this attack was planned." As the afternoon wore on, more pieces of the puzzle began to emerge. The suspicious workers had disappeared from the Piccadilly Circus location shortly after the convoy passed, leaving behind their utility truck and equipment. The truck had been stolen 3 days earlier from a legitimate utilities company, and the equipment appeared to be genuine, but was not being used for any actual repair work. Most significantly, forensic analysis of the bomb components revealed that the devices were remarkably similar to those used in a terrorist attack in Brussels 6 months earlier. The similarities were too specific to be coincidental, suggesting that the same organization or individuals were responsible for both attacks. "We're dealing with a highly sophisticated operation," Williams briefed Marcus as evening approached. "The level of planning, the quality of the explosives, and the detailed knowledge of royal security procedures suggests either a well-funded terrorist organization or possibly state-sponsored actors." Marcus absorbed this information with growing concern. State-sponsored attacks on the royal family would represent an extraordinary escalation in international tensions. The diplomatic implications alone could affect Britain's relationships with numerous countries. "What's our next step?" he asked. "The royal family will remain in secure locations until we can guarantee their safety," Williams replied. "We're reviewing all upcoming engagements and will likely need to implement enhanced security protocols for the foreseeable future." As night fell over London, Marcus stood at a window in the safe house, looking out at the city lights below. Somewhere out there were people who had come dangerously close to assassinating members of the royal family. The attack had been prevented, but barely, and he knew that the investigation was just beginning. His phone buzzed with a text message from Sergeant Hayes. "Rex still restless. Something's not right." Marcus stared at the message, wondering what else the detection dog might be sensing that humans were missing. In his experience, when Rex was troubled, there was usually a good reason. The failed attack had raised more questions than answers. How had the attackers obtained such detailed information about royal schedules? Were there additional threats they hadn't discovered yet? And most importantly, would the people responsible try again? The next morning brought no relief from the tension that had gripped the Royal Protection Unit. Marcus Steele arrived at Scotland Yard at 5:30, 2 hours before his official shift began. Sleep had been elusive, filled with fragments of dreams where he replayed every detail of the previous day's events, searching for clues he might have missed. Detective Chief Inspector Sarah Williams was already in the counterterrorism briefing room when Marcus entered, surrounded by files, photographs, and computer printouts. She looked up with tired eyes that reflected his own exhaustion. "Any developments overnight?" Marcus asked, accepting a cup of strong coffee from the perpetual pot that kept the unit functioning during crisis situations. "Several and none of them good," Williams replied grimly. "Forensic analysis of the bomb components confirms our worst fears. The explosive compounds match materials that have been tracked through intelligence networks across 3 countries. We're not dealing with amateur enthusiasts." She spread a series of photographs across the table. These images show similar devices used in attacks over the past 18 months. Berlin, Brussels, and now London. The construction techniques are identical, down to the specific type of wire used in the timing mechanisms. Marcus studied the photographs carefully. Even to his untrained eye, the similarities were obvious. Same bomb maker. "Almost certainly, but that's not the most troubling part." Williams pulled out a classified intelligence report. "MI5 believes this is the work of a group calling itself the European Liberation Front. They've claimed responsibility for the previous attacks, but this is their first attempt against British targets." "What do they want?" Marcus asked, though he suspected the answer wouldn't be reassuring. "The elimination of what they call symbols of historical oppression. In their twisted worldview, European monarchies represent everything they believe is wrong with modern society. They see themselves as freedom fighters working to destroy the old order." Marcus felt a cold knot forming in his stomach. Ideologically motivated terrorists were often the most dangerous because they couldn't be negotiated with or deterred by conventional security measures. "How many people are we talking about?" Intelligence estimates suggest a core group of 15 to 20 individuals, with a broader network of sympathizers and support personnel. They're well-funded, highly trained, and demonstrate sophisticated operational security. Yesterday's attack showed they have detailed knowledge of royal protection procedures. The implications of that last statement hung in the air between them. Someone with access to highly classified information had provided the terrorists with intelligence about royal schedules and security arrangements. There was a leak somewhere in the system, and until it was identified and plugged, no member of the royal family was truly safe. Williams's phone buzzed with an incoming call. "Williams? Yes, I'll be right there." She hung up and grabbed her jacket. "The bomb disposal team found something else at the charity venue. We need to get over there immediately." The venue, a prestigious hotel in Mayfair that regularly hosted royal events, was still sealed off with police tape and surrounded by security vehicles. As Marcus and Williams approached the building, they could see forensic technicians carefully documenting every aspect of the bomb placement and examining the surrounding area for additional evidence. Chief Inspector Tom Bradley from the Bomb Disposal Unit met them at the security perimeter. His usually calm demeanor showed signs of strain as he led them toward the building's main entrance. "What we found changes everything we thought we knew about yesterday's attack," Bradley began without preamble. "The bombs we discovered were sophisticated, but they weren't the real threat." He led them into the building's basement, where the hotel's main electrical and communications systems were housed. In a corner that would normally be accessible only to maintenance personnel, a much larger and more complex device had been concealed behind false paneling. "This is a radiological dispersal device," Bradley explained, his voice grim. "What the media would call a dirty bomb. It's designed to spread radioactive material over a wide area, contaminating several city blocks and making them uninhabitable for years." Marcus stared at the partially disassembled device in shock. The implications were staggering. How many people would have been affected? Conservative estimates suggest several thousand immediate casualties from radiation exposure, with tens of thousands more requiring evacuation and long-term medical monitoring. The economic impact would be incalculable. Williams was taking detailed photographs while Bradley explained the device's construction. The conventional bombs we found yesterday were meant to be a distraction, she realized aloud. They would have drawn emergency responders to the building just as this thing was set to detonate. Exactly, Bradley confirmed. The timing was coordinated so that police, fire services, and medical personnel would be concentrated in the impact zone when the radiological device activated. It would have maximized both casualties and symbolic impact. Marcus felt physically sick as he contemplated how close they had come to a catastrophe of unprecedented proportions. How long would it have taken to prepare something like this? Months of planning and preparation, Bradley replied. The radioactive material alone would have required sophisticated procurement networks. This isn't something that could be assembled quickly or improvised on short notice. As they left the venue, Marcus's mind was reeling with the scope of what they had discovered. The European Liberation Front wasn't just planning to assassinate members of the royal family. They were preparing to turn central London into a radioactive wasteland, potentially killing thousands of innocent people in the process. "We need to brief the royal family immediately," Williams said as they drove back to Scotland Yard. "They need to understand that this isn't a conventional security threat. These people are willing to commit acts of mass destruction to achieve their goals." The briefing took place at Windsor Castle, where the royal family had been relocated after the previous day's events. Prince Edward and Sophie listened in stunned silence as Williams and Marcus explained the full scope of the terrorist plot. The Queen's private secretary, Sir Michael Harrison, took detailed notes and asked pointed questions about ongoing security measures. "What you're describing sounds more like an act of war than terrorism," Prince Edward observed when the briefing concluded. "The distinction is becoming increasingly meaningless, sir," Williams replied. "Modern terrorist organizations have access to weapons and resources that were once the exclusive domain of nation-states." Sir Michael leaned forward in his chair. "What are the implications for upcoming royal engagements? We have dozens of events scheduled over the next several months." "All public appearances will need to be suspended indefinitely," Marcus stated firmly. "Until we can identify and neutralize the remaining members of this organization, any royal gathering represents an unacceptable risk." "But surely that's giving them exactly what they want," Sophie protested. "If we cancel everything, they've essentially won without having to carry out another attack." Marcus understood her frustration, but his responsibility was clear. "With respect, ma'am, keeping you alive is more important than maintaining public appearances. We can reschedule events, but we can't bring you back from the dead." The conversation was interrupted by Williams's phone ringing. She stepped away to take the call, returning a few minutes later with an expression that Marcus had learned to associate with bad news. "We have a problem," she announced. "Intelligence services have identified the source of the leak that provided the terrorists with royal schedule information." The room fell silent as everyone waited for her to continue. "The information came from someone with high-level security clearance and regular access to royal protection planning. MI5 believes the leak is someone within either the royal household staff or the protection unit itself." The implications hit Marcus like a physical blow. Someone he worked with, someone he trusted with his life and the lives of the royal family, was actively collaborating with terrorists. The betrayal felt personal and professional at the same time. "Do we have a suspect?" Sir Michael asked. "We have 3 individuals who had access to the specific scheduling information that was compromised. All 3 are being placed under immediate surveillance while the investigation continues." Marcus's mind raced through the possibilities. He knew every member of the protection team personally, had served with many of them for years. The idea that one of them could be a traitor seemed impossible, but the evidence was undeniable. "I want to review the personnel files of everyone with access to yesterday's operational plans," he told Williams. "Background checks, financial records, personal relationships, everything." "Already in progress," she replied. "But I need to warn you that this investigation could take weeks or even months to complete. In the meantime, we have to assume that any operational plans could be compromised." The drive back to London was conducted in somber silence. Marcus stared out the window at the countryside passing by, thinking about the impossible situation they now faced. How do you protect someone when you can't trust your own team? How do you plan security operations when the plans themselves might be handed over to the enemy? His secure phone rang as they approached the outskirts of London. The caller was Sergeant Hayes, and her voice carried an urgency that immediately grabbed his attention. "Captain, you need to get back here immediately. Rex has been indicating something all day, and we finally figured out what he's been trying to tell us." "What is it?" "Someone's been in the palace, sir. Rex is tracking scents that don't belong, scents that weren't there yesterday morning before the convoy departed." Marcus felt his blood pressure spike. "Are you saying someone gained unauthorized access to the palace while we were gone?" "Yes, sir, and based on Rex's behavior, they were in areas where they definitely shouldn't have been. We need to conduct a complete security sweep immediately." "Don't touch anything," Marcus ordered. "Treat it as a potential crime scene until we can get forensic teams in there." As their car accelerated toward London, Marcus contemplated the possibility that the previous day's attack had been even more complex than they had realized. While security attention was focused on the bomb threats and the convoy route, someone might have used the chaos to gain access to the palace itself. The thought of terrorists inside the royal residence, potentially planting additional devices or gathering intelligence for future attacks, was terrifying enough. But combined with the knowledge that someone within the security apparatus was actively helping them, it painted a picture of a threat that was far more sophisticated and dangerous than anyone had imagined. By the time they reached Kensington Palace, a full forensic team was standing by. Rex had been isolated to prevent any contamination of the scent trails he had identified, and the entire palace staff had been assembled for questioning. As Marcus walked through the familiar corridors where he had worked for over 2 decades, he realized that everything had changed. The palace was no longer a secure refuge where the royal family could find safety. It had become another potential target, another vulnerability that needed to be defended against an enemy who seemed to know their every move. The investigation was about to enter a new and more dangerous phase, and Marcus wasn't sure they were prepared for what they might discover. The forensic examination of Kensington Palace began at midnight, when the last of the staff had been interviewed and released. Marcus Steele stood in the main courtyard, watching teams of specialists move through the building with the methodical precision of archaeologists uncovering ancient ruins. Every surface would be dusted for fingerprints, every room photographed from multiple angles, and every piece of evidence catalogued with scientific accuracy. Rex sat beside Sergeant Hayes near the main entrance, his intelligent eyes focused on the activity around him. The German Shepherd had been instrumental in identifying the locations where unauthorized personnel had been present, leading investigators to 3 specific areas within the palace complex that required detailed examination. "Talk me through what Rex found," Marcus said to Hayes as they watched the forensic team's work. "He first indicated at the service entrance near the kitchen," Hayes explained, pointing toward the rear of the building. "That door is used by delivery personnel and maintenance workers, but it's supposed to be monitored at all times. Rex picked up a scent trail that was definitely human, but didn't match any of the authorized staff." Marcus knew that particular entrance well. It was equipped with both electronic locks and CCTV monitoring, but it was also the most practical way for someone familiar with the palace's service routines to gain unauthorized access. "The trail led through the service corridors to the administrative wing," Hayes continued, "specifically to the office where royal schedules and security briefings are prepared." The implications were staggering. Someone had gained access to the most sensitive operational information in the entire royal protection system. What was the third location? "The royal private quarters," Hayes said grimly. "Rex indicated that someone had been in Prince Edward's study, where he keeps his personal correspondence and private documents." Marcus felt a chill run through him. The idea of terrorists having access to the royal family's private living spaces was almost too disturbing to contemplate. How long do you estimate they were inside? Based on the strength of the scent trails, at least several hours. This wasn't a quick reconnaissance mission. Someone took their time and conducted a thorough search. Detective Chief Inspector Williams approached from the direction of the administrative wing, her expression grim. "We found something in the scheduling office," she announced. "Someone installed a sophisticated listening device in the telephone system. It's been there for at least several weeks, possibly longer." Marcus absorbed this information with growing alarm. They've been monitoring our communications. Every phone call made from that office, including conversations about royal security arrangements, travel plans, and operational procedures. The device was designed to transmit recorded conversations to a remote receiver. Any idea where the transmissions were going? Our technical team is working on that now, but initial analysis suggests the signal was being relayed through multiple proxy servers to hide its ultimate destination. Whoever installed this was sophisticated enough to cover their tracks. As the night wore on, additional discoveries painted an increasingly disturbing picture. Hidden cameras had been found in 2 separate locations, positioned to monitor the movement of security personnel and palace staff. A sophisticated keylogger had been installed on the computer used to prepare royal schedules, capturing every keystroke made by administrative staff. Most alarmingly, investigators found evidence that someone had accessed the palace's main security control room, where monitors displayed feeds from dozens of cameras positioned throughout the building and grounds. The intruder had apparently been able to observe real-time security operations and identify vulnerabilities in the protective procedures. "This is a complete compromise," Williams told Marcus as dawn broke over London. "They know everything about how we protect the royal family, our procedures, our personnel, our communication protocols, all of it." Marcus stared out at the city, awakening to another day, unaware of how close it had come to experiencing an unprecedented terrorist attack. "How long do you estimate this surveillance operation has been running?" "Based on the sophistication of the equipment and the way it was integrated into existing systems, probably at least 6 months. Maybe longer." 6 months, Marcus repeated, contemplating the implications. "They've been planning this operation for at least half a year, systematically gathering intelligence and identifying weaknesses in our security." "And they had help from someone on the inside," Williams added. "The listening device in the scheduling office was installed in a way that required detailed knowledge of the palace's phone system. The cameras were positioned to avoid detection by existing security cameras. Someone with intimate knowledge of our operations provided them with the access and information they needed." The investigation team's attention now turned to identifying the insider who had made this elaborate surveillance operation possible. The 3 suspects who had been placed under surveillance the previous day were brought in for detailed questioning, while investigators began the painstaking process of reviewing months of personnel records, financial transactions, and personal communications. Marcus found himself in the uncomfortable position of suspecting colleagues he had worked with for years. Inspector David Morrison, who had driven the royal convoy during the failed attack, had access to scheduling information and detailed knowledge of security procedures. Sergeant Patricia Wells, who worked in the administrative office where the listening device was found, handled sensitive communications on a daily basis. And Inspector James Crawford, who supervised the palace's physical security systems, would have been able to provide the technical knowledge needed to install surveillance equipment. "I've known all 3 of them for years," Marcus confided to Williams during a brief break in the questioning. "Morrison served in Afghanistan before joining the protection unit. Wells has a spotless record and 2 young children. Crawford's father was a police officer, and his brother serves in the Royal Marines." "People's motivations for betrayal are often more complex than their public personas suggest," Williams replied. "Financial pressure, ideological conversion, blackmail, personal grievances, there are dozens of reasons why someone might turn against their colleagues and country." The first breakthrough came when investigators discovered that Inspector Crawford had made several large cash deposits to his bank account over the past 6 months, totaling nearly £30,000. When questioned about the money, Crawford claimed it came from selling his deceased mother's jewelry, but he was unable to provide documentation to support his story. £30,000 is significant money for someone on a police inspector's salary, Williams observed as they reviewed Crawford's financial records. But it's also not enough to suggest he was being paid as a professional spy. This feels more like someone being compensated for specific services. Marcus studied Crawford's photograph, trying to reconcile the man he thought he knew with the possibility that he was a terrorist collaborator. What would drive him to betray everything he's supposed to protect? "We'll find out," Williams assured him. "But first, we need to determine the full extent of what he might have compromised." The interrogation of Inspector Crawford took place in a secure facility at Scotland Yard, with Marcus observing through a one-way mirror. Crawford appeared nervous but maintained his innocence, insisting that he had no involvement with any terrorist organization and knew nothing about surveillance equipment in the palace. "James, we know about the listening device in the scheduling office." Detective Inspector Roberts began the formal questioning. "We know about the cameras that were hidden throughout the palace. We need you to tell us how these devices were installed and who was responsible." "I don't know what you're talking about," Crawford replied, but his voice lacked conviction. "I've never seen any surveillance equipment that wasn't part of our normal security systems." Roberts placed photographs of the discovered devices on the table. These were found in locations that would require detailed knowledge of the palace's security blind spots. Someone with your level of access and technical expertise installed these devices. Crawford studied the photographs for several seconds before responding. "Those aren't part of any equipment I've ever worked with. If someone installed unauthorized surveillance gear, it wasn't me." The questioning continued for several hours, with Crawford maintaining his denials despite mounting evidence of his involvement. It was only when investigators mentioned that they had found his fingerprints on one of the hidden cameras that his composure finally cracked. "You don't understand the situation," Crawford said suddenly, his voice filled with desperation. "They didn't give me a choice. They threatened my family." The confession that followed revealed the true scope of the conspiracy that had been directed against the royal family. Crawford had been approached 6 months earlier by individuals who claimed to have kidnapped his teenage daughter during what appeared to be a random street crime. The kidnappers had released her unharmed after 24 hours, but not before making it clear that they could take her again whenever they chose. "They showed me photographs of Emma going to school, coming home, meeting her friends," Crawford explained, tears streaming down his face. "They knew her daily routine better than I did. They said if I didn't cooperate with their intelligence-gathering operation, she would disappear permanently." Marcus felt a mixture of anger and sympathy as he watched the interrogation. Crawford's betrayal had put the royal family at enormous risk, but the inspector had been trapped in an impossible situation where refusing to cooperate would have meant sacrificing his own child. "What exactly did they ask you to do?" Roberts continued. "Initially, just information about security procedures and personnel schedules. They wanted to know when certain areas of the palace would be less heavily monitored. Later, they asked me to provide access so they could install their own surveillance equipment." "How many times did you let them into the palace?" "3 times over the past 4 months, always during shift changes when other security personnel were distracted. I would disable specific cameras for 15-minute intervals and unlock certain doors." "Did you know they were planning to attack the royal family?" Crawford shook his head emphatically. "They told me it was intelligence gathering for foreign governments, industrial espionage related to royal business interests. I never imagined they were planning terrorist attacks." Williams entered the observation room where Marcus was watching the interrogation. "We need to assume that everything Crawford had access to has been compromised," she said. "Security procedures, personnel information, physical layout of protective systems, all of it." Marcus nodded grimly. "We'll need to completely restructure our entire protection operation. New procedures, new communication protocols, probably new personnel assignments as well." "That's going to take weeks, maybe months," Williams pointed out. "In the meantime, the royal family remains extremely vulnerable." The interrogation revealed additional details about the European Liberation Front's operation in London. Crawford identified 2 of the individuals who had recruited him, providing descriptions detailed enough for police artists to create composite sketches. He also revealed the existence of a safe house in East London, where the terrorists had been conducting their operational planning. Armed police units raided the safe house that evening, but found it abandoned. The terrorists had apparently anticipated Crawford's eventual capture and had evacuated their London base of operations. However, investigators did recover computers, documents, and other materials that provided valuable intelligence about the organization's structure and objectives. "They're not finished," Williams told Marcus as they reviewed the materials recovered from the safe house. "The documents we found include references to additional targets and alternative operational plans. The failed attack on the royal convoy was just the beginning." Marcus stared at reconnaissance photographs of other potential targets that had been found in the safe house. Parliament, the Prime Minister's residence, several military installations, and other symbols of British government authority. The European Liberation Front was planning a systematic campaign of terror designed to destabilize the entire country. How many operatives do you estimate are still at large? At least a dozen, possibly more. And they now know that we've compromised their London operation, which means they'll likely accelerate their timeline for future attacks. As Marcus drove home through the empty London streets in the early hours of the morning, he reflected on how much had changed in just 48 hours. The royal protection operation that he had dedicated his career to building had been thoroughly compromised by enemies who had proven themselves to be more sophisticated and dangerous than anyone had imagined. The discovery of Inspector Crawford's betrayal had answered some questions, but it had also raised new ones. If the terrorists were willing and able to coerce palace security personnel into cooperation, who else might they have recruited? How many other James Crawfords were out there, forced to choose between their duty and their family's safety? Most troubling of all was the realization that the European Liberation Front's intelligence about royal security operations was so comprehensive that they might already be planning their next attack. Somewhere in London, or perhaps in another European city, terrorists were using the information they had gathered to prepare another attempt at mass murder. The race was now on to find and stop them before they could strike again. 3 days after Inspector Crawford's confession, Marcus Steele found himself in an unmarked office building in Vauxhall, home to MI5's Counterterrorism Operations Center. The room buzzed with activity as intelligence analysts, field operatives, and technical specialists worked around the clock to track down the remaining members of the European Liberation Front. The walls were covered with photographs, maps, timelines, and connection diagrams that painted a complex picture of the terrorist network's structure and operations. At the center of it all was a detailed analysis of the materials recovered from the abandoned safe house, which had yielded far more intelligence than anyone had initially hoped. "We've identified the operational leader of the London cell," announced Dr. Elena Vasquez, MI5's senior terrorism analyst, as she addressed the joint task force that had been assembled to coordinate the investigation. "His name is Andreas Müller, age 34, a former German military explosives expert who was discharged from service 3 years ago for extremist political activities." She clicked a remote control, and Müller's photograph appeared on the large screen at the front of the room. He was a lean man with sharp features, close-cropped dark hair, and intelligent eyes that seemed to stare directly at the camera with unsettling intensity. Müller served 2 tours in Afghanistan with the German Army's Explosive Ordnance Disposal Unit, Vasquez continued. His technical skills and combat experience make him extremely dangerous. Intelligence sources suggest he was recruited by the European Liberation Front shortly after his military discharge. Marcus studied the photograph carefully, memorizing every detail of Müller's appearance. This was the man who had come within hours of detonating a radiological bomb in central London, potentially killing thousands of innocent people. "What do we know about his current location?" asked Detective Chief Inspector Williams, who was serving as the Metropolitan Police's liaison to the Joint Task Force. "He's no longer in the UK," replied Agent Michael Thompson from MI6's European desk. "Passport records indicate he departed from Heathrow Airport 6 hours after the failed attack, traveling under a false identity to Brussels." "Brussels," Marcus repeated, remembering that the European Liberation Front had previously conducted successful attacks in the Belgian capital. "They're returning to familiar territory." "Exactly," Thompson confirmed. "Our Belgian counterparts have been tracking increased activity among known extremist networks in Brussels and Antwerp. There are indications that Müller is preparing for another major operation." Dr. Vasquez clicked to the next slide, which showed a timeline of intercepted communications between suspected terrorist cells across Europe. Signals Intelligence has detected a significant increase in encrypted communications over the past 72 hours. The content is heavily coded, but the pattern suggests coordination for multiple simultaneous operations. Marcus felt his stomach tighten as he contemplated the implications. Multiple simultaneous operations in terrorist planning typically meant coordinated attacks designed to overwhelm security and emergency response capabilities. Do we have any indication of potential targets? He asked. The intelligence is fragmentary, Vasquez admitted, but there are references to what the terrorists call crown targets. Given their previous focus on the British royal family, we believe they may be planning attacks against other European monarchies. Agent Thompson pulled up a map showing the locations of various European royal residences and official events. The Belgian royal family, the Dutch royal family, and the Swedish royal family all have significant public engagements scheduled over the next 2 weeks. Any of these could be potential targets. Marcus studied the map, thinking about the security challenges involved in protecting multiple royal families simultaneously. Have the other countries been warned? Full briefings are being conducted today, Thompson confirmed. But the Europeans are facing the same problem we encountered. If the terrorists have infiltrated their security services the way they infiltrated ours, then advance warning might not be sufficient. The meeting was interrupted by an urgent call from the communications center. Agent Thompson took the call, his expression becoming increasingly grim as he listened to the information being relayed. "We have a development," he announced after hanging up. "Belgian police have discovered the body of a security officer who worked for the Belgian royal household. He was found in his apartment with evidence suggesting he had been tortured before being killed." The room fell silent as everyone absorbed the implications of this news. The European Liberation Front wasn't just recruiting collaborators through coercion anymore. They were apparently willing to use lethal force to extract the information they needed. The Belgian officer had access to scheduling information for royal engagements, Thompson continued. He had been reported missing for 48 hours before his body was discovered. Dr. Vasquez was already updating her analysis on her laptop. If they tortured him for information, they potentially know about any Belgian royal events planned for the immediate future. Marcus checked his watch. What's the next scheduled Belgian royal engagement? Thompson consulted his briefing materials. King Philippe is scheduled to attend a charity concert at the Brussels Opera House tomorrow evening. It's a high-profile event with over 1,000 attendees, including members of the diplomatic community and Belgian government officials. "That's got to be the target," Williams observed. "High symbolic value, maximum casualties, and significant political impact." Marcus was already thinking about the security implications. An opera house presents multiple vulnerabilities: large crowds, limited exits, and a building structure that could amplify the effects of an explosive device. "The Belgian authorities are being briefed immediately," Thompson assured the group. "But they're facing the same problem we encountered. They don't know who they can trust within their own security apparatus." Dr. Vasquez had been analyzing the intercepted communications while the discussion continued. "There's something else," she said, looking up from her computer. "The pattern of communications suggests this operation involves more than just the Brussels target. The volume and timing indicate coordination with at least 2 other locations." "What kind of coordination?" Marcus asked. "The timing pattern suggests simultaneous attacks designed to occur within a narrow window, probably no more than 30 minutes apart. The goal appears to be overwhelming European security and emergency response capabilities." Agent Thompson was receiving another urgent communication on his secure phone. After a brief conversation, he addressed the group with obvious concern. "We have confirmation of the second target. Dutch security services have reported suspicious activity near the Noordeinde Palace in The Hague, where Queen Maxima is scheduled to host a state dinner tomorrow night." Marcus felt the pieces of the puzzle clicking into place. 3 simultaneous attacks against European royal targets. The media coverage alone would be devastating, even if the attacks weren't completely successful. "But they will try to make them successful," Williams pointed out grimly. "Based on what we learned from the London operation, these people are willing to use radiological weapons and other weapons of mass destruction. We could be looking at thousands of casualties across multiple countries." Dr. Vasquez had identified additional patterns in the communication intercepts. There are references to something called Operation Crown Fall. Based on the context, it appears to be the overall code name for this coordinated campaign against European monarchies. "What about the third target?" Marcus asked. "You said the communications suggested 3 locations." Thompson was still coordinating with his contacts across Europe. Swedish security services have reported unusual surveillance activity around several locations in Stockholm, where Crown Princess Victoria has scheduled appearances next week. Marcus stood and walked to the map showing European royal residences and events. The scope of what they were facing was becoming clear. The European Liberation Front wasn't just planning isolated terrorist attacks. They were attempting to launch a coordinated campaign that would strike at the symbolic heart of European society and government. "We need to coordinate our response with our European partners," he said, turning back to the group. "If these attacks are planned to occur simultaneously, our best chance of preventing them is to share intelligence and coordinate our counterterrorism efforts." Agent Thompson was already arranging the necessary communications. "We're setting up a joint operations center with representatives from Belgian, Dutch, and Swedish intelligence services, real-time information sharing and coordinated tactical responses." "What about the British royal family?" Williams asked. "Are we confident that the immediate threat here has been neutralized?" "We can't be confident of anything until Mueller and his organization are completely eliminated," Marcus replied. "The fact that they've moved their operations to continental Europe doesn't mean they've given up on British targets. This could be a strategic repositioning designed to strike again when we least expect it." Dr. Vasquez had been analyzing additional intelligence while the discussion continued. "There's another pattern in the communications that's troubling," she announced. "References to final phase and complete implementation. This suggests that the coordinated attacks across Europe are not the end goal, but rather a stepping stone to something larger." Marcus felt a chill run through him as he contemplated what could be more devastating than simultaneous radiological attacks against multiple royal families. What could be larger than what they're already planning? "We don't know yet," Vasquez admitted. "But the volume and urgency of communications have increased dramatically over the past 12 hours. Whatever they're planning, the timeline appears to be accelerating." The secure communications system buzzed with an incoming priority message from Brussels. Thompson read the message quickly, his face growing pale as he absorbed the information. "Belgian security forces have lost contact with an undercover officer who was attempting to infiltrate the terrorist cell in Brussels," he announced. "He was supposed to report in 6 hours ago, but his communications have gone silent." Marcus understood the implications immediately. Either he's been discovered and captured, or he's discovered something so urgent that he can't risk making contact. "Or he's dead," Williams added grimly, "like the Belgian royal security officer." The meeting was interrupted again by an urgent call from the technical analysis team. Dr. Vasquez took the call, and Marcus could see her expression changing as she listened to the information being provided. "We have a breakthrough," she announced after hanging up. "The technical team has decoded additional communications intercepts. They've identified a specific time reference in the terrorist communications." "What time reference?" Thompson asked immediately. "Tomorrow at 21:30 Central European Time," Vasquez replied. "Multiple references to simultaneous initiation at that exact time." Marcus quickly calculated the timing. "That's 8:30 tomorrow evening in London, 9:30 in Brussels and The Hague. It corresponds exactly with the scheduled royal events in Belgium and the Netherlands. And it gives us less than 18 hours to prevent multiple terrorist attacks across 3 countries," Williams observed. As the meeting broke up and team members dispersed to coordinate with their respective agencies, Marcus remained behind to study the intelligence materials more carefully. Somewhere in the patterns of communications, surveillance reports, and tactical assessments was the key to preventing a catastrophe that could reshape European society. The challenge was finding that key before time ran out. The Joint Operations Center in Brussels came alive at 6 o'clock the following morning as representatives from 5 different intelligence agencies worked frantically to coordinate their response to Operation Crown Fall. Marcus Steele had flown to Belgium overnight, bringing with him Rex and Sergeant Hayes, whose expertise in explosive detection had become crucial to the international effort. The center occupied an entire floor of a nondescript office building near NATO headquarters, with banks of monitors displaying real-time intelligence feeds from across Europe. Marcus stood before a wall-sized map showing the 3 confirmed target locations, each marked with red circles that seemed to pulse with urgency as the clock counted down toward the evening's coordinated attacks. "Status report from all stations," called out Commander Erik Johansson, the Swedish intelligence officer serving as operational coordinator for the Joint Task Force. "Brussels Opera House," reported Inspector Marie Dubois from the Belgian Federal Police. "Building security has been tripled, and we have explosive detection teams conducting final sweeps. The event has been moved to a smaller venue with more controlled access, but we cannot cancel it entirely without creating public panic." "Noordeinde Palace in The Hague," added Chief Inspector Willem van der Berg from the Dutch National Police. "We've implemented maximum security protocols for tonight's state dinner. All attendees have been rescreened, and we have armed response teams positioned at multiple locations around the palace." "Stockholm," concluded Inspector Astrid Larsson from the Swedish Security Service. "Crown Princess Victoria's public appearance has been moved to a more secure location, and we have increased security personnel by 300%. Marcus appreciated the efforts being made by all three countries, but he couldn't shake the feeling that they were still missing something crucial. "Have we identified any additional intelligence about the specific attack methods they're planning to use?" Commander Johansson consulted his briefing materials. "Technical analysis of the Brussels safe house indicates they have access to the same type of radiological materials that were found in London. We must assume that all three attacks could involve dirty bombs." The implications were staggering. 3 simultaneous radiological attacks would contaminate large areas of Brussels, The Hague, and Stockholm, creating hundreds of thousands of refugees and causing economic damage that would take decades to repair. The psychological impact alone would fundamentally alter how Europeans thought about their security and their governments. "What about Andreas Müller?" Marcus asked. "Any intelligence on his current location?" "Still in Brussels as of yesterday evening," Inspector Dubois replied. "We have confirmed sightings from 3 different sources, but we haven't been able to locate his base of operations." "He's too smart to use the same location twice," observed Inspector Larsson. "After the London safe house was discovered, he would have assumed that all of their European operations were compromised." Sergeant Hayes had been working with her Belgian and Dutch counterparts to train their explosive detection dogs in the specific scent signatures associated with radiological weapons. Rex had been instrumental in developing a training protocol that could potentially identify the unique chemical markers of dirty bomb components. "Rex has been indicating consistently that there are traces of radioactive material in the Brussels area," Hayes reported to the group. "The concentrations are too low to represent an immediate health hazard, but they suggest that radioactive devices have been transported through parts of the city within the past 48 hours. Marcus studied the map showing Rex's detection points throughout Brussels. "Is there a pattern to the locations where he's indicating?" Hayes pointed to several marked locations on the map. "The strongest indications are in an industrial area about 15 kilometers from the city center. It's an area with a lot of abandoned warehouses and limited police presence." "That's where they're preparing the devices," Marcus concluded. "Commander Johansson, we need to coordinate an immediate raid on that area." "Already being arranged," Johansson confirmed. "But we have to be careful not to alert the terrorists to our intentions. If they realize we've located their preparation site, they might accelerate their timeline and launch the attacks earlier than planned." The morning progressed with mounting tension as tactical teams prepared for the simultaneous operations that would need to be executed across 3 countries. In addition to raiding the suspected bomb-making facility in Brussels, teams would need to provide security for the royal events while remaining prepared to respond to terrorist attacks that could occur at any moment. Marcus found himself thinking about the broader implications of what they were facing. The European Liberation Front had demonstrated a level of sophistication and coordination that suggested extensive resources and professional training. This wasn't a small group of amateur extremists, but rather a well-funded organization with international connections and access to military-grade weapons. "Commander," called out one of the communications technicians, "we're receiving an urgent transmission from our undercover operative in Brussels." Johansson immediately moved to the communications station, with Marcus and the other team leaders following closely behind. The undercover agent's voice was barely audible over the encrypted radio connection, and the transmission was filled with static that suggested he was broadcasting from a difficult location. Control, this is Agent 7. I have visual confirmation on Target Alpha and at least 6 associates. They are in a warehouse complex approximately 12 kilometers southeast of the city center. Multiple vehicles present, including what appears to be a mobile laboratory for device preparation. Agent 7, what is the current status of device preparation? Johansson asked into the microphone. 3 devices appear to be in final assembly stages. Estimate completion within 2 to 3 hours. Repeat, devices will be ready for deployment well before tonight's target time. Marcus felt his pulse quicken. If the bombs would be ready hours before the planned attack time, the terrorists could potentially move up their schedule and launch the attacks before the enhanced security measures were fully in place. Agent 7, are you able to maintain surveillance without compromising your position? Negative. They've implemented counter-surveillance measures and are conducting regular sweeps of the area. I'll need to withdraw soon or risk detection. Understood. Maintain position as long as safely possible and report any changes to the timeline. As the transmission ended, Commander Johansson turned to address the tactical team leaders. We need to accelerate our response timeline. If those devices are going to be ready in 2 to 3 hours, we have to move before they can be transported to their target locations. Inspector Dubois was already coordinating with Belgian tactical units. We can have assault teams in position within 30 minutes, but we'll need air support to ensure the terrorists can't escape with the radiological devices. What about the other locations? Marcus asked. If we hit Brussels first, the terrorists in The Hague and Stockholm will be alerted and might launch their attacks immediately. Commander Johansson paused to consider the tactical dilemma they were facing. We'll need to coordinate all 3 operations to begin simultaneously. Belgian teams hit the warehouse complex, while Dutch and Swedish teams moved to secure their respective royal events and search for any terrorist operatives in those cities. The next hour was a masterclass in international law enforcement coordination. Tactical teams from 3 different countries synchronized their watches, confirmed their communication protocols, and prepared to execute one of the most complex counterterrorism operations in European history. Marcus found himself aboard a Belgian police helicopter as part of the tactical response team preparing to assault the warehouse complex outside Brussels. Below him, the city sprawled in all directions, its millions of inhabitants unaware of the catastrophe that was potentially only hours away. Target building identified, announced the helicopter pilot through the intercom. Multiple vehicles present, including what appears to be a laboratory truck. Marcus could see the warehouse complex through the aircraft's windows. It was a sprawling collection of buildings in various states of repair, surrounded by empty lots and abandoned industrial equipment. Perfect cover for a terrorist bomb-making operation. All teams, this is Control. Operation Crown Shield is authorized to proceed. Execute, execute, execute. The helicopter descended rapidly toward the warehouse complex as tactical teams on the ground moved to surround the buildings. Marcus could see Belgian Special Forces operatives approaching from multiple directions, their movements coordinated with military precision. The first explosion came not from the tactical team's entry charges, but from within the warehouse complex itself. A brilliant flash followed by a rolling thunder of sound indicated that the terrorists had initiated some kind of self-destruct sequence to destroy evidence and potentially kill anyone attempting to capture them. All units be advised we have explosion at target location, came the urgent radio transmission. Unknown if radiological materials involved. Hazmat teams to standby positions immediately. Marcus watched in horror as a second explosion ripped through another building in the complex. Smoke and debris filled the air, making it difficult to determine the extent of the damage, or whether any of the tactical team members had been injured. Control, this is Alpha Team Leader. We have multiple casualties and possible radiological contamination. Need immediate medical and hazmat support. The helicopter circled the complex while emergency response vehicles converged on the scene below. Through the smoke and chaos, Marcus could see Belgian tactical officers evacuating wounded colleagues while hazmat specialists in full protective gear began preliminary assessments of the explosion sites. Agent 7, report your status, came the urgent call over the radio. Static filled the channel for several seconds before a weak voice responded. Agent 7 here. I'm alive but injured. The terrorists triggered their devices when they realized they were surrounded. I don't think the radiological materials were fully activated, but there's definitely contamination. As medical helicopters arrived to evacuate the wounded, Marcus received updates from the operations in The Hague and Stockholm. Dutch security forces had successfully apprehended 3 suspected terrorists who were conducting surveillance near the royal palace, while Swedish authorities had discovered and disabled an explosive device that had been planted near the venue where Crown Princess Victoria was scheduled to appear. Commander Johansson, what's the status of Andreas Mueller? Marcus asked over the radio. Confirmed dead in the warehouse explosion, came the reply. His body was found near what appears to have been the main device assembly area. It looks like he chose to detonate his bombs rather than surrender. Marcus felt a mixture of relief and frustration. The immediate threat had been neutralized, but Mueller's death meant they had lost the opportunity to interrogate him about other European Liberation Front operations or the organization's ultimate objectives. As the helicopter landed near the warehouse complex, Marcus joined the hazmat teams conducting preliminary assessments of the radiological contamination. Rex's training proved invaluable in identifying areas where radioactive materials had been dispersed by the explosions. The contamination appears to be limited to the immediate area around the 2 destroyed buildings, reported the Belgian hazmat team leader. We'll need to establish a quarantine perimeter, but this isn't the large-scale disaster it could have been. Over the following hours, as emergency teams worked to secure the site and treat the wounded, additional intelligence emerged about the scope of Operation Crown Fall. Computer equipment recovered from the warehouse revealed that the European Liberation Front had been planning similar attacks in at least 4 other countries, targeting not just royal families, but also government officials and symbolic national landmarks. This was just the beginning, Commander Johansson told Marcus as they reviewed the recovered intelligence. If they had succeeded tonight, it would have triggered a cascade of follow-up attacks across the entire continent. Marcus looked out at the smoke still rising from the destroyed warehouse complex and thought about how close they had come to a catastrophe that could have changed the course of European history. The joint intelligence operation had succeeded in preventing the immediate attacks, but the broader threat represented by the European Liberation Front was far from eliminated. We'll need to maintain enhanced security protocols for months, maybe years, he observed. And we'll need to completely rebuild the trust that was damaged when we discovered insider collaboration with the terrorists. As evening fell over Brussels, Marcus received word that the royal events in all 3 countries had been completed successfully, without incident. The enhanced security measures had been sufficient to protect their intended targets, and the arrests of suspected terrorists in The Hague and Stockholm had disrupted the coordination necessary for simultaneous attacks. But as he prepared to return to London, Marcus knew that the victory was only temporary. Somewhere in Europe, other members of the European Liberation Front were undoubtedly planning their next operation, learning from the failures in Brussels and adapting their tactics to overcome the security measures that had defeated them this time. The battle to protect Europe's democratic institutions and royal families had been won, but the war was far from over. And next time, the terrorists would be better prepared for the sophisticated international cooperation that had saved thousands of lives and prevented a catastrophe of unprecedented proportions. Rex sat beside Sergeant Hayes as they waited to board the transport aircraft that would take them back to London, the German shepherd's intelligent eyes seeming to reflect an understanding that his work was not finished. Somewhere in the distance, danger was still lurking, and he would be ready when called upon again to use his extraordinary abilities to protect the innocent and detect the threats that human senses could not perceive.